Da-da-da. And you just let me know when you need to leave. I can keep an eye on the time.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just checking the. Okay, good, we're live. Um, so just for anyone that's at home that's watching, there might be a bit of a lag even. So um, welcome to this morning's shared session. Um, this is Phil. He and
Hello.
I go way back, and we were just having a quick chat just before we jumped online about how we're both feeling at the moment. And you were just saying, Phil, that you've got a few little issues happening, and that um, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you were saying that that when things aren't going so well, or the way that you think that they should be going, it seems to affect how you feel about yourself. Is that
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
reason?
Yeah. And I sort of so what happened recently was just getting a virus that's been going around the country and hit my lungs pretty hard.
Yeah,
And and then I at work I did something to a rib, and you do anything to the ribs and kind of seems to affect a lot of the rest of the body because you're using these sort of core muscles. So any deep breaths or twisting, turning, bending, all of those sorts of things will bring up this pain. And um, and I noticed that there's a sort of a pattern of thinking that goes along with well, sometimes goes along with physical pain, um, but goes along with anything that does not kind of live up to my expectations of how life should be sort of turning out. And and the thought basically is like, oh, I got this wrong in some particular way.
yeah,
And then that kind of escalates, I guess, into a sort of inner war where I just seem to be fighting against myself, and it's this my mind is full of criticism, full of self-judgment. Um, and then I notice how much I identify all of those judgments with a sense of self, like, oh, this is me, and I must be wrong. Um, so yeah, it's just a pattern I really notice and don't particularly like at all.
mm, yeah, yeah. I hear what you're saying, definitely. Um, and like you're right in it too. Like I understand the rib is quite a sore thing, and it's connected to the breathing. And if you're having trouble with breathing, and I'm curious to know. Um, First, I just want to like reflect a bit on what you've said and see what comes for me in that regard. But um, oh, okay. I can sort of find that within myself where I'm doing something and it doesn't go to plan, and then it sort of falls back into an identity within myself. Um, and so the part that I'm curious about is that transition from something happening and then the transition into, oh, this means this about me. I guess that's the part that stands out in my mind. Um,
Mm.
so I mean the thing that like just to share the thing that was coming for me and probably that I'll look at in this session is like I'm doing some sort of outside activity of building or something like that. And I get the thought in my mind of how it should be. And and it doesn't turn out the way I want it to go. And then there comes this sort of feeling. It's like I'm actually making myself go back through that entire sequence again. But maybe that's what I'll look at. I'm not sure what comes for you with that. Is that something that's interesting to you, or is it the mechanism? Is it where it ends up? What part of this do you want to inquire into today, I guess?
I guess a part of it is this sense of self. Like I guess a huge part of my journey, spiritual journey, is like I want to find out who I am, like really know who I am at the core. And that's got to be beneath all of the conditioned layers. And I think it is it is the conditioning that creates that mechanism where one event in life turns into a stream of thought, not consciousness, but thought, and it becomes a story about identity. And then I feel bad about myself. And essentially, we all seem to be looking for self-love in some form or other. And we do it through these roundabout ways, like either through achievement or um, through kind of acting in a way, acting like a particular type of person, a particular character. And that's how we present to the world because we think that will return us with some sense of love. And I want to be able to give that love to myself from myself. But that means kind of diving beneath all of the layers of that story that kind of comes up in the mind when that mechanism that you talked about happens. And I find that really difficult in the moment, when everything is sort of almost enclosing, enfolding around me, all of these different judgments and self-criticisms. I find it difficult to, yeah, I guess to sort of bring the awareness below the neck and just feel all of that, feel all of the discomfort that's there, and recognize, excuse me, recognize that actually none of that is me. That's just the story that the mind is using to make meaning of something.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't.
No,
It's
it
this.
makes total sense what you're saying. And you're reminding me too, I sort of meet with this lady and um, mm, she's a little bit trapped in this negative side of how she sees herself. You know, she's a little bit trapped there. It's a bit like if you're depressed for a long time, it's really hard to push yourself out of that depression.
Mm.
And I'm just stating an opinion here. I'm not necessarily saying that this is anything. I'm just it's interesting because I've been thinking about this this topic of today being self-love and self-hate. And this woman comes into my mind, this person, and and that it's almost sort of like she's trapped between this huge desire to be loved, and for her it comes across as sort of being special. And I heard what you're saying about the actions seeming to dictate how we feel about ourselves, and then also the response from people. So she wants to be really like special in a real special way. And then she's really heavily caught in this sense of not being enough and not being loved. And and my sort of experience of self-inquiry is that we sort of move through things in two ways. Again, I'm not like I know Phil and I have been doing self-inquiry together for a really long time. So I just want to make sure I'm not that you're not taking this as me saying anything other than just an opinion, all right? Um, but my experience is that self-inquiry, it's either moving completely onto one side and being that completely and not having a sense of separation. So in kind of this case that we're talking about, it would be like for me, it would be about moving through that experience of building this thing and coming to the end of it and realizing that I'm a bit shitty at it. And I mean, maybe this is a light example, but I'm a bit shitty at it. And and rather than me like sort of having this sense of separation, wanting to be something else, if I can fully be that and experience that, then at least in my general sort of experience of self-inquiry is that it falls out the other side. You know, the thoughts that create that sense of ourself just like moves through. Okay, I'm a bit shitty, and then something will come in, some sort of insight will come in towards the end of it after I've been through that, and it will show me another. perspective. Um, and then the other way that I think self-inquiry works is that it's like a cutting, like like a direct that thing that we think that we are is it's not here and it can't actually be found. But I think the problem comes in that both of these sides can be used um, to actually validate the thing or as a mode of resistance. Um, do you know, like we can get so caught up on one side of something, and I'm saying in some way that going fully to one side of something allows us the freedom to go through it, but we can also be caught in that one side and be using that one side in a way, and self-inquiry doesn't kind of work there. But then also there's the other way of trying to like not recognizing that there's an intent to get away from something by seeing through it.
Mm.
It makes a lot of sense in my mind, but maybe I'm just talking a bit here. Um,
No, that makes sense. So I think what I hear you saying is that if you go through the sort of stages of inquiry, it will either cut off that it'll create this very clear separation between you and the thing that you were identifying with,
Both
or
things. Sorry, both things. It will be good and bad, that you won't be able to identify as good or bad in that moment
right,
of that space or whatever. Sorry.
right. And the other side would be to almost merge with the thing so much itself that it no longer becomes a problem. It's no longer polarized into good or bad. It's just is, and you feel no sway either a resistance towards it or an attachment towards it,
Yeah.
and then you kind of yeah. So that makes perfect sense to me. Um, and it just reminds me of this process of contemplation that I'm often with, and it's through something called the gene keys, and they use this um, sort of threefold method, I guess, of contemplation. And you're kind of asking yourself these inquiry questions like, can I allow this? When you're looking at a shadow of something, when you're looking at some dark place within yourself, this first stage of allowance, this second stage of acceptance, can I fully accept that this is here? And then this third stage of embrace, which is kind of the same as that.
Mm,
It's pretty similar to what you were talking about. And the embrace part is where I'm pretty much moving into a state of self-love. Like I have no resistance left to that. Oh yeah, I'm shitty at this job. I am the shitty thing in this because I didn't do this job very well or didn't do this work very well or something. And and there's no sense of resistance to it. It's just like, oh yeah. Um, and then this sense of love kind of streams through all of that,
yeah.
where you're not really yeah, you're not really part of that work. You're not really, there's just a merging that kind of takes place. And I guess that's what I'm looking for I'm looking to see through these patterns that happen when a negative wave of emotion sort of takes over. And those negative waves can hit me really hard at times and take me really deep. And it's when I'm right in the sort of the trough of that wave that I really want to be able to access this um, well, that ability to merge, to just sort of say like, okay, so maybe I am these things that my mind is saying I am, um, and maybe is that okay? Can that be okay with me?
Mm, yeah. Yeah, it's like I think it's quite challenging to define things in a particular way. Like I find within myself that I can say something and then in the next beat I can recognize that oh, it's not entirely true to say it in that way. And that's what I love about self-inquiry is it comes back to the just this one question of what is actually here. And if that is, I want something else to be here, or I want, do you know, like it doesn't try to, because I think embedded in self-inquiry often is the intent to get away, is that mechanism. And it self-inquiry is beautiful because it allows the space for that to be here as well. Do you know? It doesn't try and like pile things on top of other things it recognizes that in some way that the intent itself is the point of suffering. And as long as we keep asking ourselves, what is it that's actually here in this moment? I'm saying this, and then what is that? And then the exploration of that. And then I'm not sure what it was. What was this tool that you've been using? I didn't catch the name of it.
Oh, it's called the gene keys, as in
Gene.
genes, your DNA, gene keys.
Yeah. Yeah. So the description of that sort of the way I see it in the mind is suffering is this like straight separation where we can't look at something or we're turning away. And then like self-inquiry or the tools, that however we come across them, however they affect us, but they allow us to just slowly, slowly turn towards, like acknowledgement. I'm not sure if that was the first one, but acknowledgement that it's here, and then sort of acceptance that it's here, and then finally the embrace where the two fall into one, and
Yeah.
it's quite beautiful. But yeah, yeah, yeah. So
You, you touched on the first thing you said, you touched on something that feels a really important key to this whole pattern that we're exploring. And it was the where one moment you can say about yourself or about something that you're doing, like, oh, I'm this, or I'm good at doing this, or whatever. You give some sort of definition to a sense of self. And and then a moment later, or a week later, or a day later, or whatever, um, something changes and it's completely different, and you can no longer say that same statement. So it's like you've given yourself some sense of solidity, something to stand, a platform to stand on, or some foundation to the identity. And then life events kind of unfold and they strip that foundation away from you. And that's a really key point for me. That's one of the things, if not the main thing, that sends me sort of spiraling into negativity about myself.
Mm,
Like I think I'm this way, or I think I'm this at one moment, and then the next moment I can no longer say that, and I feel like a utter failure, I guess. Like, oh, I'm not that, so I must, I must be worthless or something. There'd be a stream of different words going through my head, kind of in the background of my head, that creates this whole emotional field of negativity that sort of is all about self or my idea of self. And and in that, there's also a kind of key to using inquiry to sort of see through all of that, to strip away all of that idea of self, and really find that this body, this being, this emotional field is constantly in flux. Like it's never standing still; it's always changing.
yeah,
And so you also pointed to in what you were just saying, another key point, which was what am I in this moment? In any moment, in any given moment, can I turn that lens of inquiry onto what is actually here? Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's really nice. We're never going to get to any inquiry.
yeah. I was one.
The
Yeah,
way we're going. Um, I really like this tool of late for some reason of this change because the change that you're talking about, it affects me too. And it comes as a shock. There's this shock of exactly what you were saying. I thought I was this, but I'm not that. And now I'm either not sure of what I am, which I think is like a fundamental fear that we have of unknownness and emptiness and not being and you know, and and then I'm over here, and maybe there's a comparison as well, like, oh, this is better or this is worse than that over here. But I like this tool of, and it embraces this idea of rather than the intent being to destroy or control or change, it embraces that kind of turning that I think that you were talking about, or that I was talking about in relation to what you were talking about before.
Mm,
But I like the tool of like, okay, like it's like a dream, right? It's like a dream that we have in our minds where this scene plays out and then it goes from one scene to the next scene, but we don't know how that they change.
right.
Um, and I like that, like, okay, I feel like shit in this moment, but if I can just stay here and be with that and recognize any movements of escape or whatever's happening as well, but then it's like it's funny to watch because it it doesn't seem to flow into another thing. It's just all of a sudden something else is here. It's like where the direction gets turned, and then when we turn back, no matter how quickly, something else is there, and
Mm, mm.
and so I quite like that, like a little bit playing in that regard with things. But I fully recognize that if there's a like intensity of feeling that you know any sort of play is hard and maybe then that's just the time for like a rest or whatever. But hey, it seems like you're going into it, so I'm gonna join you if that's okay. And
Yeah, you sort of sent me into it because there's a lot of richness in this inquiry, and even though you said, "Are we ever going to get around to inquiry?" The things you've been saying have kind of sparked off a lot of different uh, I don't know what to call them, insights or um, points that seem really pertinent to this whole thing. So so I sort of started off looking at this as a can I find this sense of self-love? But embedded in that, there's also so much about identity here. What do I identify with? And there's also so much about change and comfort, the familiarity of something staying the same. And then when change sort of happens, it creates a little bit of a wobble. And then if I resist that, it's almost like I stop change from happening, even if that's impossible. There's something about um, there's a stuckness that occurs simply because I'm resisting the natural change that would occur anyway. And what you were just talking about sort of seemed to illustrate that. Like if I just sort of sit with it in the intensity of a moment, in whatever intensity is there, if I just kind of keep watching it, it'll change by itself, and suddenly I'll notice something else completely different is already here. Whereas when I resist something because of its unfamiliarity, perhaps, because because it's different from the last moment when I was feeling all comfortable and secure in self, um, then I seem to get stuck with it. Yeah, I seem to get stuck in that place, which is almost my worst fear of being stuck in that place of intense negativity. And so I've just been watching these insights, like how they are pulling up a recognition um, of where I can be in this whole process as it's happened. Like I'm not in the intensity at the moment. Um, that was about a few days ago when I was really feeling low. But I'm remembering just through the hearing you talk, all of these sort of way markers as as I sort of go through that journey of intense negativity, intense sort of change, all my resistances to it.
Yeah, I mean, you've just done the same thing for me, set off quite a lot of like sparkles in the mind of insight and seeing. And the funny thing is that like I can't sort of grasp them after the fact. I can only sort of grasp them in the fact. And
Mm,
and I had this real welling of gratitude about the whole like situation that we were going through, and then and then just in speaking, I'm trying to pull back up these insights that I've had, and I'm sure they'll come at later points, but it's it's sort of completely left me, and
mm,
all that's left is that question of okay, what's just actually here, and and what comes to me is going into that moment of building something. I was building a compost, like a bin for my compost toilet compost.
mm,
And I'm just going through the process of it again and just slowing it down. Or it seems to be slowed down in my mind. So there's a sort of this excitement that's just above the belly button as I think about the design and like, oh, okay, I see myself as being accomplished. It's interesting. I haven't seen this in this way that those waypoints that you were saying are not only an action and a result, but it's also an identity. And it's like with that finished thing that I see in my mind, I see the sense of myself being accomplished and like being a success and being good, basically. Um, and then and then interestingly, it's sort of like what it shows me is that I'm just at my house and there's no people around. I live out in the country and so there's no one there to see that. And that really takes the wind out of the image and the sails. And so
mm.
that was one like peak and trough as I was making this thing. And then, yeah, and then it comes into kind of the doing part of it. And there's a bit of a loss of self in the doing. It's a bit meditative to be, just cutting things up and sticking them together. And, you don't need a sense of self in that moment. And there's a kind of a beauty in that. But then also this, what comes in crashing quite hard is this not being able to work something out in that moment of like, how am I going to do this, or coming up against a problem, and there's that feeling of being stuck. And then there's a real resistance to it. The suffering is so much in that resistance in that moment. Um, and this seems like something that I don't spend enough time with. It's definitely the point where I'd take a cigarette or, you know, try and walk away. So I can just rest here in that,
Mm.
mate. And I'm happy to hear what's going on for you.
Just again, sort of having things sort of spark in my mind from what you're saying, and a recognition of the difficulty to go back to something that I would like to inquire into, to go back in time, and to pull up like all of the feelings of what it was like at that time. And it's like I'm trying to, because I find it sometimes difficult to do inquiry when I'm actually in the thick uh, a of something I want to inquire into, when it's really intense, the emotion's really intense. And so I often wait for a later date. And then when I do, and I try to go back to sort of recall that intensity, it's no longer there. It's just sort of um, clear thoughts about it, or clearer thoughts, but not the intensity of sensation, which is what often what I'm looking for, to go back to that sensation from a place of a regulated nervous system so that I can really do the inquiry. And that's probably a sign of that thing you were saying, like, oh, actually, I'm wanting to inquire into this because I want to escape it. I want to run away from it in some way. And then you gave this reminder of like actually what's here in the moment. And I was looking into my body, feeling a bit of uh, a sort of line down the center of the chest, but also recognizing that there was this sense of relative peace, ease in the body.
Can I ask about self-love just in this moment?
Yeah.
Oh, that was it.
Oh, that was it. That was the
Yeah, it
question.
just came into my mind about the idea of self-love and what's is that part of the experience in the moment. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to put anything in your mind or anything. It just popped up into mine.
No,
Like,
it's a good it brings up quite a lot actually. It's a good thing to bring in. Because what I notice is all of this resistance in my mind
bless you.
to to loving myself. A lot of the self-judgment is for me is around my a lot of it comes around my sort of spiritual life, I guess. Like I'm I'm not doing all of this soul work in the right way. I'm not as far along on my path as I would like to be. I'm not as wise or I'm not as aware or awake as I think I should be. And I think the self-love piece has been a kind of it's just been there as a question. Like, can I love myself even with all of this crap here? Can I love myself even when I get irritable and sort of lose my shit, or when I'm not as conscious as I I should have been in that moment, or when I'm just depressed or sad? I'm not I'm not vibrating at this high frequency that so many spiritual people talk about nowadays. Um, can I just bring this sense of love um, to this ordinary, um, not particularly successful person, this being? And the mind comes up with lots of the head mind comes up with lots of reasons why I can't be like that, which reminds me of the specialness that you talked about before when you were talking about the lady you work with sometimes, who thought she needed to be special. Hmm. Excuse me. Need to be special to be loved. And I think that's a really common idea.
Mm,
I definitely, and I can recognize it in me. But what I'm really looking for is no matter how special or unspecial I am, can I sort of bring this self-love in, and it just stays as a question at the moment.
mm, mhm. When I asked you about self-love, what hit me actually was the exact opposite. It came in as self-hate. And as I'm sitting in this, um, going back to this, this memory or this experience of making this fucking box, right? And I've got to this point where I don't know what to do, and I can see that there's a big reaction, to get away from that feeling. And then as I was sitting in that, and I said to you about self-love, it hit me. Oh, I really fucking hate this part about me. And it started out, I really hate the sensation of it to start with. And so that brought my attention down into like the lower back sort of area. And I'm feeling that and I'm watching this sense of escape that seems to be happening, escape and fear. And yeah, and as I like just be with that, it turns into this image of me peering down into some sort of hole or something. And I'm a little bit expecting myself to see the thing that I hate, to see the thing that's at the bottom. But nothing really comes out of that hole. It's a bit like oil coming up and pooling on the top of something. And okay, okay, actually something does come now. There's a sense of disgust of something that comes up out of the hole. And I'm like just watching it. Okay, yeah, I feel some disgust here. But I mean, it seems okay. It doesn't seem like um, it's overwhelming or it's taking over or and I can find that within myself immediately. I can find, okay, there's a sense of me disgusting myself. Um, I don't know how that's tied to what it was I was doing, but for whatever reason, that's what's come up. And in this moment, I feel disgusting, which is interesting. And I can sense myself wanting to try and hide it or hold it in. And it's too much effort. It's way too much effort to try and hide it. It's quite relieving. It's quite relieving actually. Um, Again, I mean, I got no idea how this relates to the doing of the box, but it's what's here. So I'm pretty okay. It's funny to say it. I'm pretty okay to sit here in my disgustingness, Phil.
I like that. And it made me see how I have a disgust at my what I think is my inauthenticity. And it's related to what I said before about this. Um, one minute I can say something, usually about self, and it feels true, and I sort of think, oh, that's somewhere in my subconscious. I'm sort of saying that's me, like I am like this, or I can I can do this well, and then some moment later it won't feel true, and it's like seeing through some sense of falsity. It's like I've lied to myself or to the world. And there's a disgust at that inauthenticity. And I'm just gonna keep feeling into all of that. Um, yeah, because then the next thing that comes up is it's usually the words from my mind that I run away from. That's what I'm most afraid of. And when I'm really looking, I can see that the words in my mind, usually in the form of criticism, self-judgment, they're a reaction to a sort of something that is unknown inside myself, like that black goo, black oil that you were saying was sort of rising up through that hole. I, in my own mind, I was identifying that as like, oh, these are my sensations. These are these energies that are moving through my body, and they kind of bubble and swell and swirl, and um, they kind of churn in my belly or my solar plexus, and often when they're really unfamiliar, if not always when they're really unfamiliar sensations, then there's a fear about that unknown. And then the mind, to try and make them known, it adds all of these stories to it. And and it's the stories that I really hate. That's just the stories that I really want to run away from.
Mm.
Because when someone can, when I can do it myself, or when someone can do it for me to just sort of remind me, like, yeah, what does that feel like? What does that story feel like? Whatever story is coming up, like I'm a shitty person, or I'm no good, or I'm really behind everyone else in the world in terms of my growth or whatever, or I'm a complete failure in this society. I'm not doing what I should be or could be doing. Um, Someone just asked that question, like, so where is that in the body? Like, what do you actually feel around that? I have no problem kind of dropping into the sensation itself. The sensation doesn't generally feel um, um, bad or scary or whatever. So even with disgust, like I liked what you said at the end of that. Just I'll sit with my disgust. Disgust, like itself, the word by itself, just it sounds disgusting. It sounds like something I want to run from.
Yeah.
But the sensation of it in my being is generally something I can sit with. Like, oh, yeah, that's okay. That's just some energy that feels this particular way. But as soon as I start adding meaning to it, as soon as I start giving it words, it turns it in, it twists it in some way. Giving language to something, it can be a really dangerous. Sounds uh, a little bit dramatic, but it can be a bit dangerous
Mhm.
because it'll actually take me away from the thing itself. It doesn't, language doesn't accurately describe the thing itself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's perfect. It's like we experience the thought over and over and over again, and we aren't then hmm, like we aren't then able to be with the feeling, and we aren't able to be with the feeling as it is either. Because yeah, it's interesting. I'm curious to know what happens to the. I'm just watching the time here too, Phil. Okay, it's 12:44.
Okay.
So um, there's a question that came in at the end for me about what happens to the thought as you're feeling the sensation. I can see the word disgust in my mind, and it seems to be disgusting in the actual, like the picture of the word disgust. It seems to have some disgust in itself. But personally, I find that when I'm sitting with, like, I'm really aware of this, of the feeling of the story, as you were saying. I'm really aware of that. Then that can allow that mind to move in sort of new ways, or it can allow it to sort of come to an end. Whereas if I'm not aware of the body, then the story is looping and jumping from here to there, and there's
Mm.
no. I mean, maybe that's a generalization. Maybe I can't say that all the time, but
I came back from work, I don't know, a week or so ago, and I again it was one of these periods of just real, I was really down
mm,
and really low on myself and sort of thinking all of these things. And instead of doing what I usually would do, which was to have a cup of tea and then get into a shower, get a change of clothes, and just do my usual routine, I just sat outside, watching the sun kind of go down, but I just closed my eyes in the end and just determined to listen to all of the turmoil that was here, but not listen to all of the words. And so it was like the turmoil that was down in my body, mostly in my solar plexus and belly. And um, it took about a good hour, I guess. I was
mm,
sat there for an hour and a half, but after about an hour, or maybe even less, the whole the whole tone of the thoughts completely changed. So I didn't do anything with the thought itself. I think the thought is generally just some way of um, the body actually communicating to the head. You know, the head is more of the head brain is seems to be more of a communication tool rather than the place where we uh, actively bring up ideas or
like think,
change things. Say again.
think.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say think, but it seems like the thoughts are sort of are coming from somewhere deeper down, and that the head brain just is a communication tool to sort of express them out there. And so if I try to change anything on the thought level, it seems superficial at best. Like it just if I replace, for example, a negative thought with a positive one, it's never really worked very well for me. Just positive affirmations. It just seems to change things on the surface for a very short time. But when I really listen to things and do go through that process of allowance or acknowledgement, acceptance, and embrace, um, the thoughts just change by themselves. So I was just giving space for all of this sort of turmoil that was going on down here below
Yeah,
my throat, to do its own thing. And then the mind's story about it all just changed by itself. Like it was starting to use different words. There was definitely a different tone in the to the thoughts themselves. Like if they were voiced, the tone would have been much more calm, not critical, not contemptuous or whatever. So yes, I was just basically just saying that to agree with you. Like it,
yeah. Oh, you said it so nice too. Like what I hear is this, and for me, it's the reason I call myself the quack on this is because I don't feel like I have any answers or anything for myself or for anyone else, and that doing that process exactly where you're aware of what's going on, especially in the body, but also in the mind, allows that space for insight to arise, and the quality of the thought and the repercussions of the thoughts that come, are freeing and
yeah,
kind and full, full, like complete.
yeah,
I like to see it as is that when we're suffering, we've got half of the story going on in our minds, and then we need to open up that space for, like for God, you could say maybe the Holy Spirit or the universe or whatever outside thing, outside of our own limited minds, to come in and tell the whole story and for us to feel it fully and then,
yeah,
and then we can start again almost.
yeah, yeah. I like that. The that you reminded me of something that I read a long time ago, and it was about ducks. And it seems pertinent to this
Yeah,
to this
yeah.
session because just because it's sort of about identity and self-love and so on.
Yeah.
The thing said that when ducks have a fight, male ducks go and have a fight. After the fight, they rapidly kind of flap their wings and feathers and sort of shake it all off, basically. And it's like they're sort of so they don't identify with being a winner or a loser at the end of the conflict with another male duck. They're not beating themselves up because they had a conflict in the first place, but they're just getting rid of all of the flapping away of all this sort of built up energy,
Yeah.
and then they just sort of calmly go off, sit in the water again, and go about their daily business. And I thought it was quite a beautiful sort of expression of how nature just deals with its own conflicts, its own turbulence, I guess.
Yeah. It's vastly different, like I'd say generally, than how we deal with things, keeping things for years and years and years and years.
Yeah, which I tend to do quite a lot. Like I still have baggage from old hurts, old memories, old events that, yeah. And I think all of it is because sort of ego gets in the way, and which again is this just sense of self, this idea of identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Hey, just let me end the stream and we can just say a quick goodbye. Thanks everyone that watched. That was pretty awesome, I would say. Um, uh, if you got something to plug, I don't know if you got something to plug, but hey, we can do it I can add it all to the thing, unless you can think of something quickly.
Sorry, I didn't realize you were talking to me then. No, no, I
Yep.
don't have anything to plug.
Okay, well, hey, if something else does come, I'll let you know. But we can write it at the bottom anyway. But thanks everyone, and Phil's coming back tomorrow. Hopefully, we might be doing Three Amigos tomorrow. So let's see what happens.